Hello, everyone, and welcome to At Barrons. I'm Andy Serwer, and welcome to our guest, Cathie Wood, founder and CEO of Ark Investment Management. Cathie, nice to see you.
Great to see you, Andy. It's been a while.
It has, but a lot of stuff been going on, so I want to get
Yeah.
right to it. I want to start off with some kind of big picture macro questions and then talk more about specific holdings. It seems like right now, over the past few years, we've been in this era of groups of stocks. You've got FANG and now the Magnificent Seven, and they seem to kind of come and go quickly. What's your take on all that right now?
I can look at it from two angles. One would be a worrying angle, which is the market is narrowing to just a few stocks. And even before my time, there was a period called the Nifty 50, and it was in the late 60s, early 70s. And that was a precursor to a very bad time, the 70s recession and bear market and so forth. So I understand why technicians and others look at a market this way. The other way of looking at this is through our lens today. So if you look at what has happened to ARK after two very difficult years, we don't own most of the Magnificent Seven. We own Tesla in size, but the others either not at all or partial positions in our flagship strategy. And we have been able, through the second quarter, we outperformed even the NASDAQ 100, which is dominated by those stocks. Now, we're backing and filling now, so we'll see what happens as we enter the end of the year. I think interest rates moving up has given everyone pause, and so they're running back to their benchmarks. But I do think our outperformance in the first half, and it was significant outperformance, suggested that maybe underneath the market is broadening out. And that's a very healthy sign.
Fascinating. You don't think so much top down as much as you do bottoms up, though, right?
Our process in terms of our investment process, stock selection, starts from the top down.
Hmm.
And what we're doing is trying to size how big these new technologies are going to become. What kind of opportunities are they? And to do that, we use something called Wright's Law, which is a relative of Moore's Law. Moore's Law is a function of time, every 18 months to 2 years, same power for half the cost in the semiconductor world. Whereas Wright's Law is a function of units. And it says, for every cumulative doubling in the number of units produced by this new technology, costs will decline at a consistent percentage rate. So that's the learning curve. And we can learn from the cost declines and by observing price elasticity of demand, how quickly this technology is going to scale across sectors and turn into a mass market opportunity. So we certainly have done that with electric vehicles and drivetrain battery technology and so forth. We were able to get much closer to the right answer there because we had calculated that for every cumulative doubling in the number of electric vehicles produced, so 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, for every cumulative doubling, costs decline 28%. And the total cost of ownership of an electric vehicle now is lower than that of a gas-powered vehicle. And soon the sticker prices will be lower. So that's an example of costs coming down, units exploding. Last year, electric vehicle units globally were up on the order of 65%, while gas-powered sales were down almost 7%. So massive shift, weak auto market, but definitely playing into the favor of EVs.
Yeah, which leads you to your biggest holding, Tesla, which maybe we'll talk about a little bit more. Want to
Sure.
ask a few more big picture questions, though, Cathie. You mentioned the performance of ARK Innovation, the ETF, and it went to the moon several years ago, then came back down to earth hard, up year to date strongly, now backed off a little bit with the retreat this month. What do you tell investors, and do you sleep well at night? I mean, this is a roller coaster.
Well, we are a great diversification strategy if you want diversified innovation. We just wrote a paper, it's on Ark Funds, around artificial intelligence and how the market has rewarded Nvidia and Microsoft and left a lot of other stocks that are probably going to be bigger beneficiaries from this point on than Nvidia and Microsoft. Those are the stocks we're focused on. Nvidia has been primarily hardware historically. By our estimates, for every dollar of hardware sold around this innovation opportunity, AI, we think the software pull-through will be on the order, it depends on the estimate, but somewhere between $8 and $21 for every $1. So we think the market and investors broadly are overlooking some massive AI opportunities in other stocks, more software oriented.
I want to follow up and ask about Nvidia, but just one more question about the fund and your work. That people criticize you sometimes, Cathie, and I'm wondering, do you read that stuff? Does it get you down, or do you just keep carrying on with your work?
So my experience with truly disruptive innovation is the old guard, and the old guard are the names that have reached very high levels in many of the benchmarks, that they dismiss these technologies, which are simply nipping at their heels. We can talk about Zoom, for example. Complete dismissal of Zoom as an AI opportunity, and it just reported earnings, and we have some thoughts about that if you'd like to hear them later. And so, Microsoft just dominates. There's no way Zoom can go anywhere. Well, I remember Eric Yuan when he started WebEx, and at that time, Cisco, which nobody could beat Cisco. It was being treated like Nvidia is today. Cisco was developing, I forget how much they cost, maybe $500,000, these video consoles that would populate an entire room and do what WebEx ultimately did for a much lower price. And of course, Cisco bought WebEx. Well, Eric Yuan founded Zoom, understanding that enterprise communications was going to shift from on-prem, hardware-centric, to the cloud. And, it is now selling at roughly 8 times this year's EBITDA and is a real value stock. Just wait until they start showing their AI chops. And we think that will start with Zoomtopia in early October.
So it's funny now, switching over maybe a little bit to stocks. I want to go back to Nvidia because a lot of people are just discovering that company and they would consider a disruptor, but it sounds like you're almost considering them an incumbent, a legacy company. Or is it just a valuation problem? Would you get back into the stock at some point, Cathie?
Right. So we took our initial position when we started the firm, and it when it was $5 on a split adjusted basis, and we rode it all the way up, and we still own it in our more specialized portfolios, but at a much lower rate. Why? Because we're very sensitive to valuation, contrary to what many people might think. And according to our estimates, and our estimates for Nvidia are quite aggressive in terms of revenue growth over the next 5 years. We think they're in a beautiful position with the picks and shovels, but everyone knows it. Everyone knows it, and it is valued accordingly. So on this year's revenue, it is somewhere in, let's say, the 25 to 27 times sales range, depending on one's estimate. And we have other names in the portfolio on the software side. And remember, for every dollar of hardware, $8 to $21 of software are going to be pulled through, according to our estimates. Tesla is the biggest AI opportunity out there. It is the biggest artificial intelligence project in the world when it comes to autonomous taxi platforms. And it is selling for roughly, I think it's 7 times, maybe it's 6 times revenues now. So that's a very good example. And an even, we think that's the best example, but other software plays would include Twilio, which is selling at 2 to 3 times, Zoom, which is selling at roughly 3 times sales. These are all sales. And these companies have either very high gross margins, like Zoom, 80%, or they have low gross margins now, like Tesla does in the 20s. These are gross margins, but they will be rising because of this SaaS-like model that is evolving for Tesla. They will rise from the 20s into what we believe is the 50s and 60s. Not at all expected out there.
Right. A couple questions about Tesla then, since you just brought it up. One is valuation again, though. I mean, you can be right. Cathie was right. She's right. But, the stock goes nowhere for 2 years versus the S&P, which is what's happened with Tesla. I mean, okay, you can pick any point and come up with any math you want. I hear you. Also, I noticed that you said that market share probably is going to hold constant. It's just that the number of the EV sales are going to explode, which will drive their business. Either of those things sort of concern you, or are you still as sanguine about this company as you've ever been?
If anything, their competitive advantages are growing. You've noticed that GM and Ford have signed on to Tesla's charging station. They need that infrastructure. And that has increased our confidence, the fact that GM and Ford and others are signing on to this charging platform tells us that these companies understand that the world is shifting from the internal combustion engine, which still is roughly 90% of auto sales out there, to electric vehicles. Well, Tesla does not have to transition. It is there. It has that DNA already. And then even more important from a valuation point of view, we believe Tesla is the closest auto company and closest tech company to a fully commercialized national autonomous taxi platform. I know it sounds crazy, but if you are a Tesla driver and you have gotten the latest FSD, so full self-driving update in the beta, you will see a marked difference because of the breakthroughs in artificial intelligence that Tesla is using today in order to move towards full self-driving.
Right. With self-driving, question there, Cathie. We all know that the number of deaths caused by human error is, 100, 1,000x versus driverless. And yet the driverless death is going to get all the headlines and freak people out. So when will Americans, or globally, people get over that and be able to sort of just be dispassionate about the numbers rather than robot killed person kind of thing?
Yes, there is a lot of emotion, there's a lot of behavioral science in terms of what goes on in the marketplace. And we went through this with Tesla. So there are 45,000 deaths caused by auto accidents in the US, and somewhere between 1 and 1.25 million globally. 80 to 90% of those are caused by human error. So with Tesla, it was very interesting. Out of the 45,000 accidents that kill people, only Teslas seem to be featured as national news. And there were very few of those, but every single one of them was publicized. And but truth wins out, and that's our philosophy. Do the research. If you're right, then maybe the National Highway Transportation Safety Association will make the point that 80 to 90% of human deaths in autos are caused by human error. And they have done that. In fact, when they analyzed Tesla's first fatality, it was in Florida, and it was a blindside by a truck. And it took them 6 months, I think, to analyze it. But they basically came back and said, oh, it seems as though, given the safety features in a Tesla, Tesla's cars are 40% safer than most other cars out there. And that became a selling point for Tesla, for people who actually read these safety reports. So truth wins out.
You mentioned that Tesla's kind of a lightning rod. And to be perfectly frank, Cathie, I mean, some of that has to do with Elon. And that's a risk. I mean, are you concerned, one, about Elon's foray into Twitter, and two, his behavior generally?
And we've had to face this issue since we bought Tesla, which was the day Ark opened its first funds in 2014. And, back then, and in 2015, I remember first talking about him when we had the opportunity to be in the media. And I said, he's our Thomas Edison. He is, our age's inventor. And inventors, if you study what they invented historically, if you go back to the Renaissance man, if you go back to Copernicus, who's I put him down as one of my favorite inventors, because he argued with Ptolemy about what was the center of the universe, the Earth or the sun. And Copernicus said the sun, and all the physics then matched what he was observing. He was an inventor of many things. I think Elon is that inventor today here in the world. And I have watched him surround himself by incredible professionals, very talented engineering teams. And they work for him for less pay, perhaps, than they might get elsewhere, because he is solving the world's hardest problems, including, I would say, Twitter, now X, the controversy over censorship versus not, and just opening up the algorithms, letting everybody see how they're evolving Twitter into a healthier platform, the world's public town square. So he wants to solve the hardest problems in the world, and thank God he does.
Yeah, well, it ain't easy. And you don't necessarily succeed every time either. I think we'd all acknowledge that. It's a portfolio business, right?
Yes, and just to pick up on that, if you look at what Elon has done with SpaceX and rockets and reusable rockets, so being able to land them on barges in the ocean simultaneously, that's amazing. But do you know how many times he had to fail to get that to work? And now we're in the artificial intelligence age, and that's the same is true with everything AI. It'll get better and better over time, but it will be wrong in the beginning. Not until it perfects with more information will it get it completely right.
We have so many stocks to talk about and not so much time. So you mentioned Twilio, you mentioned Zoom. What about Roku? That's a big holding of yours. What's the thesis there, Cathie?
Yes, well, it is the TV operating system. So you'll remember in the day, cable dominated, right? But it was very much regional. Well, this is the TV operating system for the US. This is not regional. And many people get confused when they hear Roku. They think of hardware, which not very attractive business, tends to be commoditized. That's not what Roku is. Or they think of competition, Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, so forth. And that's where the big error is. Roku is hosting all of them. It is the platform hosting them. And it is growing in market share yearly. The advertising environment has obfuscated what's going on here. Most of its revenue is advertising based, and advertising is in a recession. But if you take a look at what happens during recessions, the new way of doing things gains massive share. And we saw that last year, and even in the last quarter. I'll use the last quarter, those numbers are fresher in my mind. But Roku's revenue surprised on the upside, up 11%, in a scatter market, which is its primary advertising market, sort of the spot market, that was down quite significantly, in the teens, I think. And so it's taking massive share, and that gives us increased confidence. Nonetheless, because many, I'll say, old-time media analysts are very focused on the cable companies and the broadcasting companies and what they've grown up with, this is highly disruptive to them. And this is what I mean by truly disruptive innovation and the old guard. It's not just the old companies. It's, and I'm not calling the analysts old, but the analysts who grew up on these old companies and are used to those models and to that DNA are finding it difficult, especially given what they hear from those companies, finding it difficult to migrate to this new world. They're beginning to migrate because, again, truth wins out, and the share gains are, undeniable now.
Coinbase is one of your largest positions. What is the best way, Cathie, for the U.S. government to regulate crypto, number one? And number two, do you foresee the demise of fiat currency, and how risky would that be?
Okay, so in terms of regulation, what has been happening is the SEC has been really ruling by enforcement actions. And that's not a very healthy way of doing this. So what is happening now is the judicial system and the legislative system are coming into play. That's what's great about the American system. You have the three branches of government, and of course, Gary Gensler was appointed by the president, had to be approved by the Senate, but still, I think of it as an executive appointment. And now we've got the court saying, okay, the SEC is overstepping its bounds. And we've got the legislative branch. This will become an election year issue, crypto, coming through with bipartisan support, interestingly. Not perfect, but we have Democrats and Republicans together on these bills, coming through, bills around stable coins and market structure and so forth. This is a new asset class, and this is what we need to happen. It's what happened, believe it or not, with derivatives. And there were court cases around derivatives that went to the Supreme Court. And we do believe Coinbase's suit with the SEC, or the SEC's suit against Coinbase, will go on appeal to the Supreme Court ultimately. So I think the judicial system, legislative system will balance this executive branch ruling by enforcement, which is not healthy for us. We're losing a lot of innovators to other countries. And that's unfortunate because the US DNA is all about innovation. And when you think about crypto, and we should call it the internet financial system, let's call it that, instead of DeFi, or decentralized finance. DeFi sounds defiant. But if we use better semantics like internet financial system, what that is telling us is the internet was built out without that financial system. Nobody knew commerce or financial services were going to take place on the internet. In fact, no one would put their credit card on the internet, if you'll remember. Now, of course, that is not true. And so this is the layer of the internet that the engineers skipped in the early days. And now we're just introducing it. and it's going to collapse the cost of financial transactions. If you look at financial transactions today, to go from merchant to consumer, there are 7 intermediate steps. All of those are toll takers. And this could collapse to peer-to-peer or just one intermediary, like a digital wallet, like Cash App, for example. But it's going to take a lot of costs out of the system, which is what technology does.
Right. Final question, Cathie. How do you think about your future and the future of Ark and your company? What are your plans? Do you think along those lines?
Oh, sure. We're very excited about the future. We do think there's a pendulum shift brewing back from passive or benchmark sensitive, and to us, there's not much difference between those two, to truly active management. And I think we began to see it in the first half before interest rates lifted here again. And we do think interest rates are going to come down because we think deflation is the bigger risk, not inflation out there. But we were happy to see the broadening out of the market when it came to innovation. Love that. We have big plans. We said it when we started Ark, we want to own innovation. That sounded very bold. And in the public markets, if you think about it, when people think about disruptive innovation, they do think about Ark. Now we're moving into the private markets with a venture fund, which we started late last year. We're democratizing venture capital. That's what our clients have been asking us to do. And so you'll find Ark Venture on the Titan app. So we are moving, we not only have a social media and a social marketing strategy, but now a social distribution strategy. You can buy Ark Venture on the Titan app, and we're getting access to deals, to company opportunities that many institutions and foundations are not getting. And that's because of our go-to-market strategy and the desire of many venture capitalists to participate in this democratization movement, because it helps their companies. It gives them more visibility, and it helps them attract more talent. So really excited about that. And then in the crypto world, we have a number of strategies brewing, and very excited about how they will scale, especially as regulation evolves and gives institutions more certainty that this new asset class, which is very little correlation to other asset classes, has a place in their portfolios. So venture, crypto, but we think the low-hanging fruit is in the public markets as we move back from passive towards active, as disruptive innovation disrupts the traditional world order. And the closing comment here, Andy, is we believe that truly disruptive innovation is valued in the public and private equity markets at roughly $15 trillion today. We think that's going to scale to 200 trillion by 2030. So that's almost a 40% compound annual rate of return for the innovations themselves. And it is our jobs to pick our spots and give our clients exposure to some of the most amazing opportunities in innovation history.
All righty. Sounds like a lot in the works. Cathie Wood, founder and CEO of Ark Investment Management. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Andy. Great to be with you.